people. Sorry, luckily we're early on in the episode here. We're only a few minutes in, but I think, sorry. Looks like we may have been not showing. So actually, we'll just go right over the intro just one more time for the people that are in the live stream. Sorry about that, guys. Just noticed that something else is amiss. So we're here with our special guest, and it is Chris from Australia, a regular on the show, a regular emailer and listener of the show for a while. Sorry about that, guys, in the live stream. Didn't realize I had an issue there. So Chris, again, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sorry about that. So we're basically, guys, if you guys have been with listening to the show for a while, we actually did talk about this when you first released it. And I'm pretty excited about it because it's an incredible thing. It's one of those things that, like I was saying early on in the show about, like there is some fan art out there for Dark Tower, but not as much. And I was hoping with like the movie that it would be a hit so we can get more fan art. And it was just so happened that you ended up kind of taking that up a little bit, not necessarily because of what we said, but you did end up doing some fan made. It's like I almost think like an infographic is one of the first things that comes to mind when I see it. But yeah, so I guess we can start with talking about the inspiration for it. So what are some things that inspired you beyond being a Dark Tower fan? Or actually, I know we have new listeners all the time, so maybe you want to just even a brief intro to your Dark Tower fandom.
Yeah, okay. Well, I was a Stephen King skeptic for most of my life. I just dismissed him as some writer of pulp that the masses liked, a bit like McDonald's, and you know, people like me didn't read that sort of stuff. You know, a very good friend of mine told me about the Tower, and I again in my mind said, yeah, I'll never read that. But he actually bought me the first 4 books, and so I thought, well, you know, better kind of have a look at them, you know. And unlike a lot of people, I was sucked in by the gunslinger pretty much from page 1.
Really?
Totally loved it. Yeah, I was. I wasn't like I was going, oh my God, what's going to happen next? But I just loved the way you could just pick it up and just drift through the pages and just be in this strange world, and you didn't know whether you were in our world or whether you're in some like fictitious world and our world didn't exist, and all this sort of stuff. And that's kind of not really revealed until, you know, Jake appears at the way station and he starts talking about, you know, some strange place where, you know, the buildings reach the sky and all this sort of stuff. And just the way Stephen King just very gradually and slowly revealed how things started to be connected between all the different worlds in this multiverse he's created. So I really enjoyed the gunslinger, but then when I got to Drawing of the Three, oh my God. From that point on, it was like, I love the gunslinger. Drawing of the Three completely blew me away. And then the Wastelands too on top of that. I think one of the things that really grabbed me the most for the whole series was the idea of both Jake and Roland living 2 existences at once, and that experience driving them mad. Because so often when you have these, you know, alternate.
Oh, we lost Chris on Skype. Oh, we lost YouTube.
It's it's reconnecting. It's the age-old Skype issue when it comes to
future, where it's like, okay, the future's been changed.
Hold on a second, Chris. Can you hear us?
Sorry, Chris. We had a little bit of Skype issues there. Skype is kind of cutting in and out. Can you just go over that last little bit again? We just lost you for maybe 40 seconds.
Oh, okay. So I was just saying the thing that I loved the most probably about the books was the idea of Roland and Jake going mad because they're essentially living 2 existences at once, and having that reconciliation through Dutch Hill, because it's so different to what most, you know, sort of time travel timeline things present to us, you know, where like in Back to the Future, you know, if the futures change, then the previous timeline no longer exists. But with Roland and Jake, it still does, and that must really, really do your head in. And I think Stephen King really captured all that. So I love The Dark Tower, and I eventually went back and started reading other Stephen King stuff, and I'm now, I wouldn't call myself maybe a constant reader, but I've read about 8 other books all related to the Tower, and I just think he's brilliant now. So yeah, that's my Stephen King background.
Awesome. That's
fantastic.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I know that we've especially had more listeners recently being that had a harder time with Gunslinger, and I'll admit I was one of those as well. But at the same time, there were elements of Gunslinger that definitely did, like, because I like Hey Jude, like when that shows up, like that like really threw me through a loop, and like, that kind of like, it's never to necessarily like put down book one, because I do love book one, and it's just a little bit harder for me with the style being a little bit more almost poetic. But at the same time, I still do. It's still one of those things that enthralls me. Is like, is this our world in the future? Some post-apocalyptic thing? Is it another world? Why are they having Hey Jude at their bars and stuff? Like, it's just weird stuff like that. It was stuff that definitely kept me. I mean, because at some point I stalled and a little bit on book one, a tiny bit. Something brought me back. I think it's like some of that stuff is what really brought me into like back to it and carried me into like Drawing of the Three, which really knocked me out of the park.
I just had you dragging me through book one. Because I remember reading halfway through and just being like, dude, Tab, what do you have me reading? This is so weird. You're just like, get through it, start book 2, then we'll talk. And it's just like, are you sure? And you're just like, nope, come on, you're going with me on this path, so let's do it.
Yeah, and it's one of those things like that. It's always a first impression thing, because I love it so much now when I read book one that like I never want it to feel like we're necessarily like anti book one, especially like it's just one of those things. The first time it's a little bit. Like, it's different than King style. Like, whereas, like, Chris, you come from a background not necessarily, like, being a huge King fan. So, like, for you, it was kind of easier maybe to jump in, whereas me and Peter had some experience of the King to where it felt different than most of his stuff, and it still does in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I must admit I thought, because I'd heard, from so many people, oh, it's so different to his usual stuff. I was quite, like, surprised that I don't find it that different to the other books of his that I've read.
Yeah, it's definitely a different one. I think there's just it's like that youthful thing. I think because he wrote it when he's so young. I think there's just like an element of like gall almost that it took to write that in the style that he did. And I almost like, not that he lost that necessarily, but like I just think that as he became more of a refined writer, it kind of lost some of that. I don't know, like, and I don't want to even say ambitious, because that's the wrong word too. There's just something about it that like only a 19-year-old he could have written. I mean,
let's think about this for a second. A 19-year-old took on this project with no end in sight. I mean, realistically, when he started this, he had no plan for the future. He's always said that he just kind of writes when it comes to him. And to pull in something like this, I mean, he's compared it to Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. Just to think about something that large at 19 is just unbelievable. To think that me at 19, I couldn't even find my shoes half the time, so that's just unreal.
Yeah, and then
didn't he write in one of the intros something about how at one stage he had a plan, but he lost it?
He lost the outline. It was left in
no, like off his motorcycle.
Oh yeah, it fell off his motorcycle. That's what it was.
Yeah,
you know what I like to think? I like to think that someone like pickpocketed off his bike or something like that. Like it's somewhere in one of these stories that someone's like, you know what? I don't like the way that story turns out. I better take this copy and make him do it over.
Yeah, it's like an audacious project overall. Like to like for him to look at things like Lord of the Rings and go, hey, I'm going to do my version of that. Like that's just like that's an insane thing. I mean, there's a lot of authors out there that like that they may write a few books in their lifetime, and he's written so many. But then on top of that, to tackle something that's so big and so in depth and so just breadthy that like basically encompasses most of his universe. It's unreal to think about. Like I don't know, but
and also to come up with something so completely different to Lord of the Rings, while still obviously inspired by it. I mean, I'm currently listening my way through Wheel of Time. I don't know if you've read that series, but it's like 14 books or something.
Yeah,
and I'm enjoying it. I'm up to book 4. But the first book just felt so much like someone was trying to copy Lord of the Rings to me.
Yeah.
Whereas, Dark Tower, it's like, okay, well, they're on this epic journey, but really the nods to Tolkien are just so obscure. Like, there's a riddling competition on a train that's live, as opposed
and wanting
to
to kill himself and
with
them.
Gollum in some cave,
Yeah.
So the nods are there, the connections are there, but the feel and the storytelling is so different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like I almost see more of like, I mean, yeah, you have those small connections there, but like me, I almost see it as like just the breadth of it. Like Lord of the Rings is so deep and dense that like for King to just go, hey, I'm going to do something similar to that. I mean, he didn't know he'd end up probably doing something bigger than Lord of the Rings in terms of like, I mean, it's hard to say because I guess Tolkien did write a lot of stuff that's been published since his death that he really expanded that universe quite a bit. But like with the initial 3 Lord of the Rings books and like maybe the Hobbit, like the Dark Tower is a lot bigger than that in a lot of ways. And it's just like that's what I mean by like the audacity of like just how big this project is for a young writer especially to be like, hey, I'm going to take this on. Like he didn't sit there and go, hey, I'm going to wait for a few years, let me get published and then work my way in for 10 years to get comfortable, then I'll write it. No, he's like, no, I'm just going to write it now.
If it gets published, it gets published.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he was just like, if it gets published, it gets published, so be it. And then that's why it ended up in men's magazines because that was one of the only places that would pick it up.
Yeah, with the first book. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. So, which other like when you said you read some others that were connected to the Dark Tower, which ones have you read?
I started with The Stand because everyone said, "Oh, you have to read The Stand."
Of course.
And I hate to admit, I wasn't hugely impressed. I know that is it Peter? That's your favorite?
That's Tad.
That's me.
Tad.
Yeah.
Tad. Yeah. Well, it's got Randy, of course. So
exactly.
Yeah. So I started with The Stand and I enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong, but I wasn't going, oh, gee, this is like the best thing I've ever read. But then I started getting into the more, the sort of directly connected books to the Tower. So I then went on to Insomnia, and that I really enjoyed that. And since then I've read or listened to Eyes of the Dragon, Salem's Lot, Hearts in Atlantis, It, The Talisman, and Everything's Eventual. So I was trying to like catch up on all the backstory. Everything's Eventual's got Little Sisters of Illyria in it, and it's got Dinky Earnshaw's backstory. Hearts in Atlantis has got Ted Brodekin's backstory in it. Eyes of the Dragon, of course, is another Flag story. So that had to be read. But I've got to say, of all those ones, as a standalone book, by far and away the one I enjoyed the most was It. I absolutely loved that. It blew me away, and I have to admit I've yet to see the movie, but I'm still very much looking forward to that.
It was good. You should definitely see it.
And that's where you follow along with Peter, because I think Peter's is probably it when it comes to Stephen King overall, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's so hard for me to pick. I mean,
gun to your head, you're probably going to pick It.
Gun to my head, I'm probably going to pick It. But honestly, man, one of my all-time favorites is I loved Firestarter.
Yeah, I did. You have mentioned that too.
I really
not necessarily connected though.
Not connected. But if we're going to go connected, absolutely It.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely
for sure.
Although technically, I found a link for Firestarter.
Well, that'll definitely be something for a later roundtable.
I forgot about that. I meant to talk to you about that. Chris, thanks for reminding me about that.
So when it comes to like some of the inspirations, then at what point did you? Was there any like single thing that you saw that was just like, hey, I want to do something similar to this? Or you gave us a few things to link to, and I was just curious, like how the genesis of this project kind of worked out, if there is one.
I was trying to pinpoint that myself, and I couldn't identify a specific thing. Like I've always really liked visual representations of these time travel type stories and so forth. And I remember seeing Primer, or you guys might call it Primer, that Shane Carruth movie that came out about 10 years ago, which is like he made for $7,000 or something, and it won Sundance or something.
Oh,
have you guys seen it?
I haven't seen that one. I'm like us being local here for Sundance. Like I'm actually trying to go back and find some of the more like famous Sundance winners. I went to it a couple years ago, and I'm trying to like backlog now, but I just haven't got there yet.
Well, I mean, if you go to it, it's a time travel story, so that's no real spoiler. But I watched that movie and I was awake the whole night just trying to work out how the hell
That sounds like Tad after Arrival.
Yeah.
that thing worked. Oh, Arrival is child's play compared to Primer.
Oh,
You
okay.
have to watch Primer, seriously.
Yeah.
But so I got online and I found just so many like infographics trying to explain what the heck is going on in this movie, and that I really enjoyed. But somewhere along the line, I was sent an XKCD cartoon which had various timelines of famous movies, including Primer.
Yeah.
But the main one was of Lord of the Rings. And I think somewhere that must have stuck in my head, because if you look at that, it's very similar, I guess, in structure to what I ended up creating for Dark Tower.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have that up on the screen now with it has Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Jurassic Park, 12 Angry Men, and Primer, which is funny there on the bottom.
Primer is Primer seriously just squiggle like someone doodled like squiggly lines?
Well, XKCD is supposed to be an amusing cartoon, so I think that's where the joke is. Yes.
Yeah. So we got that up now, like with the Lord of the Rings and stuff, and I think that one's interesting. Or like Star Wars, obviously, is a timely one this weekend.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Have you seen it yet?
Yeah.
We actually just came from the theater seeing it together.
Yeah, we went.
Yeah, I saw it last night. Yeah.
Yeah, we went and saw it this morning. It's that's a dense movie. I will say that it's one to see a few times.
Yep, indeed.
But yeah, no. So this Lord of the Rings one, I think is interesting, just because I mean, especially as we talked a few minutes ago about like the how dense like the Lord of the Rings is and like Tolkien stuff is. To look at this and just kind of, even at a glance, without looking too in depth at this Lord of the Rings one, is just, it kind of just shows you like how many different like paths and stuff. Like, I think that's one of the things that surprised me, because I'll say with Lord of the Rings, I came to that through the movies actually. I hadn't really got around to those books, and like I've never been into like fantasy in that style necessarily. Probably because I hadn't got the right one in my hands. Once I got Lord of the Rings, I'm a lot more into that stuff. And what surprised me about the movies is just like how much they had this group together, then they just split, and it felt like nothing ever came back together in a lot of ways. And this map definitely reflects that in terms of in terms of like, especially the books are even worse. I mean, I love those books now, and yeah, it's just kind of a I won't say a mess, but yeah, when you look at it visually, it's like, wow, like things are all over the place. So
so much going on.
None of these compare to what you've done here, because I mean, even if you look at like Lord of the Rings, they're all still on one plane of existence. Star Wars, one plane of existence. All of these other ones, you've taken the Dark Tower series, which has multiple levels of the tower, and put it on a timeline. I mean, this I'm looking at this. I have this right in front of me, Chris. I have one laid out on a desk right here in front of me, and I'm looking at this, and I've read The Dark Tower 5 or 6 times now. I am blown away by how you were able to connect all of this stuff. Like, where tell me honestly, Chris, where did you start?
Yeah, where's
the start? Okay, I'm going to start here.
Did you do like a read through of the series, like with like a notebook open to like, like I guess the construction of it.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Look, I think I read all the books hard copy. And that was about 10 years ago now, I think. And then in the intervening time, I thought, I'm never going to have time to actually read these books again, hard copy, but I drive to and from work every day. So I got the audiobooks, and I just found myself listening to it. I think I've listened to the audiobooks about 3 times now. Mm-hmm. And every time I listened to it, I'd pick up something else, like, oh, so that happened then. And so now we're back in 1977, even though Eddie was drawn in 1987. And how can that be? And who's in what world? And so I kept thinking, I should just make some notes as I go. And that never really happened. So I think sometime early last year, I just started drawing sketches of what I remembered in my head, and they're pretty crummy, but I've still got them, and I've actually put some of them on my website, so they're pretty crazy to look at. But what I then did around about the middle of last year, I bought all the ebooks, and I just literally sat down and started searching for keywords.
Oh, okay.
So I did search for 19, not because of, 19 is a special number, but because 19 is the start of most of the years in the book. So, whenever was a date mentioned, whenever was like the word weeks or days or months mentioned, things like this, just to like hone in on what happened when and how long it took them to get from A to B and this sort of stuff. And actually just creating this spreadsheet of data, I was able to start working out when things began and when things ended, and what key moments happened throughout, I guess, the entire mythology of the books. And then in combination with that, I was also quite interested in, and this became clear at the end of book 6, I think, where they've got that faux diary of Stephen King's, which it finishes with him dying.
Yeah.
Which is still something I've yet to really work out in my head. Like, that obviously must be some other world diary, because then in the books he doesn't die. So, and in our world he doesn't die. But is our world the Keystone world? Well, no, I don't think so. But anyway, that's a separate thing. So once I came up with all of that, I was then able to start drawing some pictures that started to resemble more like what the poster ended up becoming. At one point, I just got a whole heap of A3 sheets of paper, which are like moderately large, and just taped them all together in this great big long row, and just started drawing, starting from early on, the early 1900s, sort of, the birth of Don Callahan or something like this, something very early on, and then just slowly moved right through to the end of the books.
So, Chris, so did you go like chronologically? Is that what you're saying? Is that you started from the earliest point that you could find and started working your way to the end, which to the right side of the over here, which is obviously more modern, like 2001 I see here, and then Roland going through his door at the end of the Dark Tower. So did you work like kind of like a left to right, like a chronologically, or did you like pick Callahan and then do his timeline and then take him different places and go character by character?
To tell you the truth, I can't fully remember. I think it was a combination of the two.
Oh, okay.
And of course, then there's that. We're talking here essentially what ends up being the bottom half of the poster, which is the chronological bit in the various New Yorks and the various Americas. And then at the same time, I did the top half, which is the mid-world half of the poster, which is, well, at least originally, was pretty much in order of distance along the beam. So it's not necessarily in chronological order across the top. And then I got a bit of feedback about not initially including the whole Magus bit and the chunk of book 4 and that sort of stuff. So I ended up including all that in the top left-hand corner of the poster, and so that made it even a bit more complicated at the top. But so the top is more a very, very rudimentary map, and the bottom is more of a timeline.
Real quick, just as a pause, do you want to throw your website out there? I know some people in the chat are wondering about visuals. We're going to get to some specific portions of it, but your website, people can buy a copy, which I highly recommend, and also I'm sure they can see at least a version of it to where they can kind of follow along with what we're saying as we're going here in the chat.
Yep, sure. So there's two ways of going. I do have a blog which is dedicated to all the work I've done on this, and will include some future projects which we can talk about later. And that's at chartingthetower.wordpress.com. Because I'm not just charting the timeline. I'm hopefully coming up with some other infographics and everything about the Dark Tower. So it's chartingthetower, all one word, fanatics.wordpress.com. And if you're specifically looking for the poster itself, and you can buy that, if you go to etsy.com, just search for Dark Tower Timeline, and it's the only hit.
Okay, awesome. I'm just putting that stuff in the chat as well.
I see one.
Cool.
I see one instance here where you were talking about, Chris, right? Almost middle right, just a little bit, where we see the shootout where Henry dies with Roland and Eddie versus the mobsters. You could say.
Yep.
If you go straight down from that and just over to the left a little bit, you see the Founding Fathers meeting, which took place in 1986. So the Tech Corporation was formed before Eddie saw his brother die. That's just one of those things to think about.
Yep. Indeed, that is the case.
That's crazy to think about. Like, Henry died after the Tech Corporation was founded.
I will say, like, I don't know, like, if I'd ever really considered something of this depth, but I think the one that really got me, especially the first few times reading it, where I was like, God, I wish I just had a visual of this, is Jack Andolini.
Oh yeah,
because we see him die how many different times, and he just keeps coming back, like, or he keeps showing up in different spots, different places, and you're just like, dude, this guy is like everywhere.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, but the interesting thing about that is, different times, different places, different worlds, guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we see him first, that's where we first meet Eddie, our main man.
That's my boy.
And who's the only person who could possibly play Eddie Dean in a movie?
Aaron Paul.
Aaron Paul, right. Indeed. So when we see our man Eddie, he's having the big shootout in the Leaning Tower. That's what it's called, isn't it? That's where we are. So that's Andolini in Eddie's world. And we know Eddie's world's different from the Keystone world because of co-op cities in Brooklyn in Eddie's world.
Yeah, right.
So that's Andolini in Eddie's world, who then gets taken through the door into Midworld and has his untimely demise.
He had an appointment with the Lobstrosities he couldn't break.
Exactly. But then, of course, we also see him in Keystone Earth, Keystone, New York. And he's involved in quite a lot of interactions there, including at the ambush in Maine, and at the bookstore in Calvin Towers bookstore in New York, and so ultimately I've kind of drawn on the timeline, the existence of these sort of multiple versions of the same person, spanning the different worlds.
Yeah, and I just remember that from that, even the early, and it's one of those ones. Every time I get to like one of his other appearances, I'm always like, oh yeah, I always remember like that feeling of just like, what the hell, man? Like, and I mean, not that it doesn't make sense, because it absolutely does in the context of this story, but it is one of those things where it's just like, God damn it, there he is again.
Yeah, it's especially since the second time, the first time he reappears in this series is when Eddie's gone toe dash and he's in the bookstore with Jake, and he sees him come in and start threatening Calvin Tower, and he's like, I watched him die. We're right along there with Eddie. We're reacting the same way. Like, I watched this guy die.
Yeah, and it was that sort of thing that made me just want to see like this timeline things. Like, I understand how that happens, but I need to see it, because there's so much going on and so many different times and places and so forth. So, so that it was all that sort of stuff that made me really want to do this.
Yeah, and I will say, I also have up on the screen one of the other inspirations you sent. And this is actually one that's funny to me, because I think this is actually one of the ones that helped me map out Inception. When it first came out back in 2009. I want to say this infographic came out around not long after the movie, and I remember there's a few small details that just weren't ironed out in my head till I saw this. So it was like kind of a cool moment for me when you sent that as like one of your things, or like, this is kind of an inspiration, even in a small way. And I was, because this one almost matches the Dark Tower in that there's like multiple levels of things going on,
right? So
you have to keep track of like people going through different like planes of existence in some ways. So I just had to at least mention that, like, that's kind of funny for me to see that again. It's been years since I've seen it, but it was one that helped me figure that movie out a little bit.
Yeah, and again, there are a lot of Inception infographics out there, but that one is just so beautiful. Don't you agree? It's just such a beautiful image, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think like for me, like if I recall correctly, the thing that like was like some of the timing of like the ending with like the kicks and like and how they all like timed up, and that was that infographic where I was like, oh, okay, now I finally get it. Like there were just some small little like wrinkles of the thing that I had to iron out, and that thing helped me. And yeah, you're right. It's just it's a very beautiful infographic. I think I probably even have it saved on my hard drive somewhere. So because it's one of those I'm like, oh yeah, I just got to have this, and then probably haven't looked at it since. But it is one of those things that like at some point I'll go through my hard drive and find it and go, oh look, there it is again.
Yeah.
And that another thing I find interesting about that, I mean, Inception, it's a genius movie. I absolutely freaking love it. But clearly the whole thing was planned out from the word go.
Yeah.
And then you look at the Dark Tower and you kind of get the feeling Stephen King just made it up as he went along.
Yeah. I think he definitely shoots from the hip. I would say that when it comes to Dark Tower.
You got Inceptions up here on the screen, and it's got this nice triangle. It's nice and organized, exactly like you're talking about. Then you look at your timeline and what Stephen King created. It's just like, whoa, this is a mess. Look at this.
And some of that has added a lot of discussion. I mean, even recently, on one of the more recent roundtables, we had the discussion about the age-old discussion of the good man. Is that Walter or is it not?
Yeah.
Like that's just one of those debates, because I honestly think that like, I don't know that King was necessarily keeping it straight in his mind, and sometimes he uses them as though they're the same, and sometimes he doesn't.
Yeah.
And I think it's just one of those things that, like, we're probably putting way more thought into it than he did, these years apart in some cases.
Isn't the Co-op City mess up, isn't that him just admitting that he messed up as a human being? Hasn't he said that?
Absolutely. He said that. And the thing that I only discovered by doing this project is there are nods to that in the books.
Yeah.
He actually when Eddie and Roland meet him the first time, must be the first time because there wasn't much chat the second time. They say, so where is Co-op City? And Stephen King replies, I think it's in Brooklyn. And if you look on the timeline, he hadn't written book 2 yet. So he what he's basically saying is that at that stage in his life, he wasn't quite sure where Co-op City was, but he thought it was in Brooklyn. So, because he's the creator of the characters, his errors of knowledge become the reality of the characters. Yeah. Which I think is genius, and the fact that he can like essentially write that into the stories is brilliant in my opinion. And this is where a lot of people poo-poo the idea of him writing himself into the stories, but I think he did it so well, and I'd be really really disappointed if that changed. I think there's been some talk of him, and we know he's never going to do it. I mean, he doesn't have enough time, but rewriting the stories without him in it, I think that'd be a real shame.
Yeah, I totally agree. I know some people like dog on that, but like it's one of those things that, like, it was weird for me at first, but like I've fallen in love with it to the point so much where I'm just like, it would be really hard for me to picture them without that. And I almost feel like because like it's such a, I mean, it's not only is this series genre bending, but like it is reality bending in a lot of ways.
Oh, it is.
I think that like that ultimately comes to a head with like him appearing in the books.
It's funny, every time I read the books, and especially my first time reading through, when he first introduces himself, I was always the same way. I was really, we're doing this now? Like we're gonna bring the author into his own books and make him like like this cornerstone and everything like that. And then it's not until is it book 6 or book 7 where they have the palaver with him on Turtleback Lane, and it's just like as soon as that happens and he goes back and finds like the old manuscripts and everything like that, and you get that, I think it's like a chapter or 2 chapters where he's just like, oh yeah, I've thought about Roland today. I haven't thought about him in a few years. I should pull that out. As soon as that happened and that chapter happened, every time reading through again, I'm like, oh yeah, that's why I liked him inserting himself into the series itself. And I was like, I love that chapter.
Yeah. Yeah, no, It's very good, but we don't need to like gush about how good the books are because we obviously all agree on that. So.
Yeah, indeed. And now we had the primer one up on the screen here for a second, but now we're just about to change over. I guess the people in the chat are on a little bit of a delay, but now we're over to we had to have a few portions here to pull up and just like marvel at, starting with that very beginning here with Midworld.
This also includes the section you were just mentioning where you brought in the Magus timeline and added it to the very top left of the timeline here. So before you added Magus, was this the whole top part here? Was that just blank? Oh, we lost him on Skype.
Again, Skype being Skype. Unfortunately, there's
there we
go. Sorry about that. Skype is the necessary devil that like there's nothing better than it, but it's not necessarily great.
Yeah. So it wasn't blank.
Okay.
There was just a bit more space used for the information that I had. So originally, I basically just had Roland's timeline coming in from the left, entering the Mohaine Desert.
Okay.
And that's how it was. But then, I put a sort of a preliminary version of the poster out on the internet at sort of medium resolution so that, people could enjoy it and download it and, zoom in and read the text and everything. And that's still out there. So, if people want to download that, if you go to the website we discussed earlier, you can find that online. And it was quite sort of simple up in this top left-hand corner. But, of course, the one thing that everyone said, apart from, gee, that's amazing, was, but what about Magus? What about, his coming of age? What about, book 8? Where's the little sisters and all these sorts of things? So I thought, all right, this is what people want, and I guess in my mind I'd never pictured that part of the story because what I was trying to do was visualize the loop, and all that happened before the loop. So I initially thought, well, how can I even possibly include it? I mean, that needs to be on a separate poster to the left of this poster,
Yeah.
But then I sort of thought, well, I can reclaim some real estate here if I push things to the south and all this sort of stuff. So yeah, I guess that area is a little bit more cramped compared to a lot of the rest of the poster. But it's now basically from Roland's birth right through his coming of age, interacting with what we soon to eventually discover is the Man in Black. What's his name there? Where he's being his father's.
Yeah, is that when he was? Yeah, I think it was Martin at the time. Martin Broadcloak.
Yeah, and he's having the affair with his mum and all that. Then they get sent off to Magus, and he meets Susan and Chayu Tree's there, which we all hate to love and love to hate. But so isn't it funny? Every time you read book 4, it's like, I really want to read this, but I really don't know that I want to put myself through it.
Yeah,
every single time.
And to me, that is my favorite book, but it is one of those ones. Yeah, like I do find myself every single time slowing down as I get toward the end. Like even if I'm doing like audiobook, like it just suddenly turns into a thing where like suddenly podcasts get listened to instead of the book, or just different things. Like I
you know what, I feel like music today.
Yeah, I purposely extend it because it's just like. It's a rough one, man. Like I remember actually being at work one time, and not necessarily even Chayu Tree, but it was actually I think the book 7 stuff with some of our characters dying. I actually remember getting slightly choked up at work. I mean, I'm in the middle of we work at like a machine shop as like a background, so it's not necessarily like I don't know that you could picture what it's like ultimately, but it is one of those things. I'm like, man, got to be careful what I'm listening to here. I'm going to start crying in the middle of a machine shop over some fictitious characters, but it always strikes you different, I think, whenever you get to like some of those moments, like even though they're coming. And there's just one time it just happened to really hit me with like Eddie and Susanna's reaction and stuff.
I had a similar incident to that one time. I was pulling into work and I was parking. I was listening to book 7 and I got to Oi's death. As I pulled into work, I'm sitting there in my car. I'm just like, I'm not gonna cry. I gotta go into work. I'm not gonna cry. I'm okay. And then he's like, Olin, and I was like, oh.
Yeah, indeed. And I guess we keep gushing about the books, but I guess that's what this podcast is about. And Chris, now that you're with us, it's a little bit of a different conversation, and I'm not opposed to having that conversation as well alongside the timeline here.
We're getting some comments in the YouTube chat about Tad actually having feelings.
Yeah, and most people would probably say, yeah, Ted doesn't have a heart.
And Ted has feelings. Ted has feelings about Randall Flagg.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when he dies, every time I always light a candle, and I just have
you have a little vigil.
Yeah, exactly.
A black candle.
Yeah. I get a smiley face button.
Pentagram.
But no,
you kill a few spiders.
I think that's what I love a lot about this timeline, though, is like if you don't want to necessarily dive into the books, this is such a great way to like relive moments. You know what I mean? Because especially if you've got into it, like most of us, I think that listen to the podcast have, or with me or Peter, we've read it enough times where all you have to do is like say like always death. I think most people are able to replay it in their heads, because we've read it. And so like with this, like it's one of those things where you can kind of just go and like grab a character on this timeline and follow them through, and you're taking the story from a different angle, or whether you're just like looking at like we have on the screen now, like basically encompassing books 1 through into the beginning of book 3 toward the bottom here, and obviously book 4 at the top. And it's one of those things where it's just like you just relive it, like just as you guys were talking a few minutes ago, I saw Hax dies, and it's just like one of those ones like going back to that chapter and like in my mind seeing that hanging and stuff.
The breadcrumbs and everything like the bread underneath them.
Yeah. So that's
most recent book I've read listened to was Gunslinger. I listened to it a couple of weeks ago, just to revisit things, and it's only like 7 or 8 hours an audio book, and you knock it off pretty quickly. But my God, that's a good book.
Yeah,
it is.
Absolutely. And I always struggled with our book club in terms of like forgetting, because especially with the movie, we ended up having some gaps with our book clubs, and I ended up forgetting, like I'd keep forgetting, like wait, like some of the Roland backstory stuff, like have we read that yet, or is that stuff from book 4?
Yeah.
Or is that stuff from like, because you don't get the full like Roland backstory picture in book 1. Like there's like it piecemeals through the first like 4 books. You get like different elements of his backstory.
You don't get all of his backstory until you get all the way up to like book 6 sometimes. There's still things that you find out about him later on. In book 5, he reveals some stuff to them.
Yeah.
After the dance and everything, and introducing himself to the Kalas and everything. And then also he shares information with Callahan that he never shared with the Quartet. So it's like, even then you're still learning about this main character. You're like, wait, he did what?
Yeah. And in my mind, I clump it all together to where like with the timeline here, this what we got at the top on the screen is basically all of Roland's backstory, with like going up through Jericho Hill and stuff. And so from the beginning, from his youngest moment through there, and it's just one of those things that for me, sometimes I always almost picture that in my mind as like a singular book, even though I know it's piecemeal throughout the series. Yeah. So like when we're going through book 1, I'm always having to like stop and like go back and reference, like, wait, was this mentioned yet? Or like a moment I have in my mind, it's like because of the book clubs are making an attempt to like not spoil anything. So like even as small as detail of Roland's backstory might be something that they don't get until a later book. So it's we've run into that a few times, but.
That whole Jericho Hill thing, that's just mentioned in about 2 pages in book 6 or something, isn't it? It's certainly quite late.
Oh, yeah, it comes up where he mentions that Jamie was killed. They killed Jamie, right? Is it Jamie or Alan that they
the Sentries?
The Sentries kill him. Yeah. And then he's like, and then Cuthbert died at Jericho Hill. And then you even get a later reference where Flagg says he's the one that personally killed Cuthbert.
Yeah, and and both those are up on the screen now. You could definitely find both those. So yeah, Jamie being the first one.
You can see Flagg's line there, just popping up next to Cuthbert dead.
Yeah, exactly. He just pops up, whoop, kills Cuthbert, drops back down.
And that's where my internal conflict comes in, because being a huge fan of Cuthbert and a huge fan of Flagg, that's like the one moment where I'm like, damn it, what side am I on here?
They finally meet each other, and it's all over.
Yeah, it doesn't work out well.
Look at Roland's life there.
Yeah.
It's bang, Susan dies. Bang, he shoots his mother. Bang, Jamie dies. Bang, Elaine dies. Cuthbert dies. and then
Yeah.
he's just off wandering aimlessly for this tower.
Yeah, exactly. But that's definitely like I guess a long way of just saying like that's what I love about this so much is like it's just a way to relive even small moments of the series without necessarily having the commitment to reading the whole series, because that is a commitment.
Yeah, it is.
And so like I just love it, man. And like looking through like and then like down to the bottom, like the reason I screen grab this is like going through books 1 and 2. Like that's what we've done in our book clubs now, and it's like, man, this is such just a microscopic sliver of what we have to cover during the course of whoever knows how many years we're going to be doing, our book clubs.
Yeah,
but we've only done this small little portion, but like how much that is, is.
There's one little detail I just noticed about this up on the very top left. It's actually kind of cut off on this in the top right above where it says hanging in Hack's dies. It says travels for years / decades / centuries in search of the Dark Tower. I love the fact that we really don't know how long he wanders.
Yeah, time's funny.
Time's funny in Midworld.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just awesome. I love it. And yeah, with this here we have like the doors. I love having that highlighted the way it is with the prisoner, Lady of Shadows, and the pusher. That's awesome because I don't know. Those are some of my most iconic things. Like if I was ever gonna get a Dark Tower tattoo, honestly, it might be something to do with the tarot cards.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But just because like I just think they're just such like because like they mean so much to like Dark Tower fans.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one for subtlety in general. Like I like things that maybe slip by. Like if I'm gonna do a Star Wars tattoo, it won't necessarily be like Yoda holding a lightsaber as much as it might be like I actually have one. It's like the Mandalorian symbol on Boba Fett's shoulder. Like a Star Wars fan knows what that is. Other people don't. And so like something like that like would be perfect with like the tarot cards.
You know what you should get? You should get the best tarot card, the one that says the prisoner, because that's the best character in the entire series.
If I get a good enough artist, I'll make sure he has him looking like Aaron Paul.
Yes, win.
Yeah. So let's see. Let's jump on over to the next little bit here. We got for this is
oh boy.
Yeah, this one's jumping over to Algociento, which is of course Peter's favorite thing to talk about. Which is
I hate you so much. Dad.
That's the reason I highlighted this. Of course, is to come over to look at this section.
Hashtag Tad is terrible.
It took you almost an hour that time.
You really are a terrible person. Why do you make me relive this almost every time we talk?
Well, I was just mentioning how like you can go and relive the whole story. So like of course there's elements of the story that of course we have to relive, Peter.
You know what I really like is that big black X right there where it says "Man in Black" died. Hey, Chris, could I ask a favor?
Sure.
Could you change that to "Man in Black gets eaten"?
Gets eaten alive.
Yeah, gets eaten alive by a spider. Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, no, but this is just to show like how intricate it is, especially like as a more close-up look versus like that last slide we had was a little bit more spread out in terms of like the timeline we're covering and characters. And here you see, so you got like different colors for every character. Correct? Is that?
Yep. Yep.
And
if you look carefully, you can see that that everyone's best buddy Mordred is actually shown.
Inside of Susanna.
In Susanna.
Yeah.
And then when Mordred's born, he like branches off onto his own line there. And if you were to go back to the previous image, you can see that the oracle impregnates Susanna, and then there's a very, very thin red line in Susanna that gradually gets wider and wider as Mordred gestates.
Oh, awesome! That's incredible. That's like the kind of deep detail that's like really awesome. Now, I'm surprised you didn't run out of colors. To be honest with you, now was that an issue at all as you got deeper into it?
It was a major issue because the original version that I created looked great on the screen, but when you printed it, half the colors you couldn't see, and so it was hard work to kind of get colors that kind of made sense and tied people together appropriately. So essentially there's a variety of different blues for Roland, Jake, and Eddie. But then because they're kind of his car buddies, I used similar colours for Elaine and Cuthbert and Jamie DeCurry. because they could be recycled.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was gonna say. I think that like overall, like every time I like look at like a specific character, I always find that the color really seems to match them in some way. Like, like with flags being black is like probably the most obvious, but like it just feels like in general, like if colors mean anything, it feels like you pick definitely the right colors for the right characters to like reflect the characters in a way.
Yeah, and obviously the Crimson King had to be crimson, so anything on the sort of the dark side tended to be a variety on that, so various shades of pink. So you've got Blaine there, of course, having to be pink anyway.
Yeah.
And the Oracle, and I've got Gabrielle Deschain there as a sort of a pale pink as well, and Hax. So yeah, all the ones that were maybe not really car buddies.
Yeah.
On the red side of the spectrum, and with those pale blue bombardier's eyes, we had to have Roland being pale blue.
I was actually going to ask that. That was going to be my next question. Is like the blue color being Roland's eyes, because that's what I thought of instantly. So that definitely great intent for the design there, because it definitely came through. Because I definitely picked up on that.
I did too. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and getting Randy black was important to me, of course. But the original version of the poster had a white background, and it just didn't work. But then, of course, you couldn't see Randall Flagg, so I had to come up with this sort of black line with a hazy white glow around it. Because you can imagine that probably Randall Flagg does have a bit of a glow about him. So,
and a little bit of good, right, Peter?
No,
with some white there.
No, it's a lie.
But yeah, like I love like with like also with the X's signifying deaths, like back to the Algo Ciento section here, is like I think that like you almost could like find these pockets where a lot of people end up dying in the books, like be it like even just bad characters, if you go back and like look at like some of the book 2 stuff, I'm sure there's some lines that end there with like
Mort,
Jack Andolini, like different people like that. But yeah, like so here for Algo Ciento, we got 2 major X's, which we already kind of pointed out. And like the battle is pointed out there with Eddie dying shortly after, and yeah, it's just such an awesome and that's what I did the very first time that you showed us this, which is months and months back, like in terms of like, because I think we talked about it before, somebody mentioned in the chat, and I think that's what I actually ended up doing, is just picking a character and just kind of tracing them all the way across, and I found that really fascinating to do, is just pick a random character and just kind of see where they go, especially a minor character. Like major characters are cool too, but some of the I love like Moses Carver is called out there, because with him and his salute to Roland being one of my favorite moments of the book, I always kind of gravitate towards him. I think I actually followed his line through at one point just to see the different interactions he had with people, the timeline of like when Susanna disappears and everything else. Like it's kind of interesting to look at from his perspective what life would have been like.
Yeah, because with Moses Carver, of course, we don't see much of him, but he's mentioned quite a few times, and there are interactions that are implied on various occasions. Like obviously, Aaron Deepno at some point went and spoke with Moses Carver about forming the Tech Corporation. We don't know exactly when that happened, but we know it happened between, the photograph of the founding fathers and the palaver in East Stoneham at the boathouse. So, obviously there's a bit of guesswork there, but that has to have occurred somewhere around about there. So I've taken a stab at it, but so Moses Carver's line is quite interesting, as you say.
Yeah, it is, and like it's one of those things. It's just always fun to like think of it from different angles, because like it is one of those things. Like just like you said, like he's not in it a lot, so it's one of those things that when I followed that line, it's like, oh yeah, I guess like it's kind of cool to like play out his timeline and see how it would have looked on his end. It's kind of a cool way to come at the books differently, and I can't hype this thing enough, Chris. I'm because I'm just such a nerd for all kinds of things, but this is the kind of stuff that like really gets me going as a nerd, is like just details and stuff like this. Like I don't know.
I love this little detail down here. It's not in the slide that we have up, unfortunately. I'm sorry, guys. I just noticed this one down at the bottom. It's book 6, when Roland and Eddie are going to find Tower and he's gone. He actually has Tower's line go up and away from where Deep No is, and it says Tower buying books. That's amazing. And then he comes back and joins up, and that's when Roland gives him like and he gives him the tongue lashing, and Roland talks to him and everything. That's fantastic.
And of course, you picked that out as much as you love Tower. Of course.
I hate that guy so much.
He's so freaking annoying, isn't he?
Yeah, like I there's a few characters in this series that get Peter like heated up in terms of just angry. Like if we talk about him, even if it's off mic and we talk at work or whatever, and like Tower is one that always gets him like just fuming.
He's such a piece of shit.
I'm
sorry, but he is.
My favorite chapter title in the entire series is Eddie Bites His Tongue.
Literally. Bleeds biting it.
You can just feel Eddie just getting more and more furious with this guy.
Yeah, indeed. Now we're jumping over to the next slide, and this one is actually for just looking at the main line of things. This is where it all kind of comes to a head. And the one thing I find really interesting with this, because this is where we're getting to the Tower, is the way you illustrated Roland going back and tying back into like the beginning of the story. And I find I just love that, because I mean, what more iconic thing for book readers than the end of the story? You know, I think like that's probably going to be up there. That and like Blaine are probably some of the most talked about things for Dark Tower fans.
Yeah.
So I love like that, especially as it's going up. It goes up the tower, and then from there, you know, shoots over and stuff. That's a great way to illustrate it. And I love how you also see the lines kind of dissipating as like, you know, Oi dies and stuff, but then like
Susanna leaves.
Yeah, she leaves, and it just gets to the point where you're down to just the one line. It's it's just awesome.
Where is the what's the Danville's house? There it is. That's the one I was looking for. Patrick Danville's there. Yeah, he is. He's the bottom blue line that comes jutting up at Danville's house. Okay, I see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can see so he comes up from his world somewhere, which is marked on the thing as well, the world of insomnia.
Yep.
Arrives at Dandelo's house at some point. We don't know when. That's a pretty disturbing scene, isn't it? Seriously, the idea of this guy without a tongue, like in a cage in a basement. I mean, that's Stephen King, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those.
That's pretty nasty stuff.
Yeah. It's like an iconic thing for him almost. Like I don't know how he ever got away with a pen name, because like even like if it doesn't go full on horror, it feels like he has just such a realism to him, or like almost like over the top with like things that like I don't know how anyone would ever mistake his writings.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. But yeah, so you can see Danville basically travels along as a passenger all the way to within cooey of the tower, and then he just turns around and wanders off somewhere.
Yeah,
we don't know where.
Yeah, exactly. We don't get any resolution on him necessarily.
Yeah, another detail I love is right around the base of the tower, you can see you put a Cancano Ray and you shaded it red to represent the roses.
Yeah.
That's where my artistic graphical skills sort of fell apart. I was hoping to have little like flowers or roses or something around there, but it's just like, oh, I can't do this. We'll just have a red glow. That'll have to do.
Yeah, no, it's awesome though, because especially like with the black and red against each other, those are just two colors that always work really well together in terms of with the tower and that, and like that's why I've always thought like the image of the tower would probably be such a striking image if we ever saw it on screen, especially because I picture it as being a pretty striking image with just a sea of red with like just this black monolith in the middle of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because in the movie we never see the base, do we? We just see it. Just see some random middle bit of it. Do we see the top of it in the movie?
Yeah, we do see the top, but
when it's saved.
And I'm almost glad that we don't see the bottom, because that's just such an iconic thing that like I personally would not want to see that. Assuming the movies or TV show pans out all the way, I wouldn't want to see it until Roland sees it in a lot of ways.
That big reveal of the Field of Roses would be epic.
Yeah, the audience shouldn't see it before he does, because it is just that impactful, especially book fans. And if it did get to that point where we were watching that happen, by that point there's probably a bigger audience because people have caught on to the show or whatever, and it would just be a pretty big moment for everyone, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what do you in terms of what were some of the final touches on beyond like adding the magus and the backstory stuff? Like I guess is there a point when it really felt like it was coming together? Like, because I'm assuming there's a lot of frustration involved, or am I just like, is that just me projecting what probably would have happened to me?
Look, but by the time I sat down at the computer and I had all my pictures and all my scribbles and all my pencil sketches and everything, I knew what I was doing.
Okay.
So, it was just that it was more a matter of how am I going to fit it all onto one piece of paper.
Yeah.
It was like the way I designed it initially, it was designed to be printed out on an A0 sheet of paper, which is twice as big as A1, which is what I ended up printing it on. So I actually designed it to be on a much bigger sheet, but then no one's going to be able to stick that on their wall, So I scaled it all down and then had to increase all the fonts and all that sort of stuff. So there was a bit of mucking around, but I basically knew how it was going to look before I started putting it together, and then it was just a matter of doing it. So there was a lot of the software I was using didn't seem to have a spell checker, so there were a few errors of spelling along the way that needed fixing up, and that's where the internet community helped a lot. I had a few people pointing things out to me. I misspelt Don Callahan's name. I had it with a G because Callahan sometimes is a Ghan, but it was pretty quickly pointed out to me that was wrong. So his name's mentioned a lot, so I had to find everywhere I'd mentioned his name and change it.
Oh.
So that was a bit of fun and games. My brother actually had recently written a book where he'd used the word limousine, and I'd mentioned that Roland was in a limousine at some point. Where does that happen? Like right near the end. So I misspelt that, and he picked that one up for me, so that was good. But it was really just picking up on little things, trying to track down some information. I mean, one thing that I've picked up since I made it was I originally listed Don Callahan's birth as date unknown, but I've since at least narrowed it down to a year now that I've listened to Salem's Lot, because it's mentioned that I think in 1975 he's 53. So, you can do the maths on that and work that out. But I've yet to update it and come up with a version 1.01 or something with that.
Yeah.
There are a couple of other sort of minor things that probably still need doing. But it did get to a point where it's like, well, this is as good as it's going to get for now. I could probably keep adding things to it forever. But it's going to get too difficult. Like I've got a sort of little list of what I'd like to add, but never got around to it. Like I'd like to have a timeline for Black 13. How cool would that be?
Oh yeah.
Because it travels around quite a lot in the books, and you've got a pretty reasonable idea of where it goes and when and so forth. So
and definitely where it ends. And definitely where it ends. As far as we know.
You actually did put a point on here for 11 September 2001, Black 13 destroyed, question mark?
Question mark, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're left to assume that, but I read somewhere on the internet someone saying, no, ultimately, these are strong, very powerful magic objects, but they are just made of glass. So they were saying, it would have been pulverized.
Yeah, because they worry about dropping the pink one in Magus. Is that if it gets dropped and broken, their heads will go to Farson, basically.
Yeah.
So we got the next slide pulled up here, and this is actually one that I requested. It's a little bit of the left side with the Keystone World highlighted. Do you want to just explain a little bit about the New York Public Library, the Lot Tech headquarters, and everything like that? What this is like, just like map points, basically. So like when a dot comes down here or a line crosses here, that they visited that place.
Yeah, so you can see there are various sort of circles around the place, generally white ones, white ellipses, and they're where events take place. And rather than just say, well, they take place somewhere in New York, I've divided all those locations up into, different vertical positions on the image. So you can see we've got bookshop written there, and that's, Calvin Tower hangs out there, so that's where his timeline starts.
Mm-hmm.
But the interaction with Jake, well, I've got here, Eddie sees the contract and sees Keystone Jake. So that's a fascinating point there, because that's where Jake and Eddie see Jake 77. And Jake 77's just come out of the Bookshop of the Mind. What is it? The Manhattan Bookshop of the Mind or something. And he's just presumably bought a copy of Charlie the Choo Choo and Riddle Dee Dum. But the question is, well, where does he go now? Because it's a different Jake. This is Jake from Keystone World, not Jake from the Jake we knows world, where Co-op City's in Brooklyn. So where does that Jake go? Does he go to he obviously, goes off and visits the Rose in Keystone Earth, and then presumably he follows his way to Dutch Hill eventually in Keystone Earth, and gets drawn into maybe some other version of Midworld on a different loop, and gets pulled through by Roland there. So it's pretty. It's fun to speculate. You know?
That's the stuff that trips me out. I can't remember if it was even because I remember some of the social media posts that you had on this originally, and I can't remember if that's where the discussion came up about the fact that maybe it's the first time I realized anyway that Eddie, when they're seeing this Jake, that's a different Jake from a different world, and that just kind of trips me out a little bit, because it's
that's not how Jake reacts either. That's the thing that kind of fools you for a second, is he's like, oh, there I am. Well, wait, that's not you. That's you from another plane of existence.
Because it's easy. It's easy if you keep it as a singular line where it's just there's only one Jake. It's easy to almost kind of play with it, but then when you start dealing with these different realities, that becomes a lot more trippy to me.
Yeah, because there's even the Jake at the end. That's a Jake Torrin. That's Eddie's brother.
Yeah.
So you got that one. I also love in this shot you have England, and you have the Robert Browning's timeline where he writes "Child Roland to the Dark Tower came,"
and then his birth and death.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, that's a good one too, because ultimately that is kind of where we all. I mean, is that where it started? Because what was wasn't there something in Shakespeare or something? I'm trying to remember is it Child Roland maybe mentioned in? I thought it was mentioned somewhere else, and then he took it and then made the poem.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I found that out after I made the poster.
Oh,
the whole Child Roland thing is a Shakespearean reference. So you could go back earlier still.
Yeah.
All right.
And the other thing that's quite interesting here too is Stephen Torrens' will was written on the 19th of March, 1846, so before Robert Browning wrote the poem. So the reference, because ultimately, of course, Eddie sees the will, because Cal Tower shows it to him. And we know that it was written in March 1846, so that predates the poem. But how far back do we go? It's hard to know. But so what you're basically showing here is I chose to start things in 1812 at the birth of Robert Browning. I thought, well, that's a good place to start. Turns out I could have gone back further. And then the last thing on the far right of the poster is the publication of Book 8, Wind Through the Keyhole, and that's 2012, so it's exactly 200 years span.
Oh, that's awesome.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I didn't. I only noticed it when I finished making it, printed it out, and I was just poring over the thing, and so that's a fun coincidence, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed.
A little thing I like about this as well is you can see the different shades he used here in New York Public Library. The lot's a little bit darker, and then back and forth. if you look at the poster guys online and see down at the bottom where you see Callahan's highways in hiding, you can see that he just has him just going all over the place through all the different levels and everything like that. I love that because he jumps Americas, right?
Yeah, and I agree. That is actually one of my favorite things because like that part of the books is one of my absolute favorites.
Callahan's story.
Yeah, so like I'm Chris. I'm glad you added that in there because like I mean I guess it's a kind of a mainline thing in a lot of ways, but it is just one I'm really happy that's there because like I don't know, like it's one of my favorite things. Is his story.
I love the fact, Chris, that you didn't put it as like a singular line and just put highways in hiding. You have it going up and down and around and everything like that because he is just jumping all over the place.
I had that in my mind so early on in the process. It just had to be that way.
That's fantastic. We got a couple questions coming up in our chat for you. What is your favorite character and moment from the series?
Favorite character, Rhea of the Coos.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. You and Peter share that one.
Oh, I hate that woman. If you can
I think Rhea is my favorite character I love to hate. She's the very first time we meet her she's so revolting.
Yeah, absolutely. And Peter, you have to at least admit that.
She is a character I love to hate.
She is so disgusting, and she's certainly not my favorite. And that image of her feeding from Susan's aunt, the blood is just revolting.
Yeah, and I like. It's one of those things like I was thinking about, especially like early in the, like maybe even a year ago before, we were really in the movie craze. It's one of those like things like, I can't wait to see Blaine and stuff. But it's one of those things I was like, man, like when they hammer down a Rhea thing, like that'll like put an image out there that finally that's like solid. But like, I almost think it might be worse not to have it because I'm sure all of us in our minds have some really horrendous thing in our mind, like because like it's almost like one of those things like your imagination's probably always going to be worse than what Hollywood can come up with. And I think Rhea is one of those things that I always think of as like probably one of the more repulsive images in the entire series.
It's just
especially toward
disgusting.
Yeah, especially toward the end, especially what I'm thinking too is when she's all like just completely like almost decaying,
like the scene that Chris just mentioned, like the only way that she's kept alive is Cordelia's blood.
Yeah. And then the Charyu tree type stuff too.
Oh god.
Twice in one episode.
I just gotta slide it in there. It's just like a knife through the ribs of Peter. Just Charyu tree or Algo. It's just some of those phrases I can turn real easy.
This is gonna be one of the worst episodes.
Seriously, I can't really distinguish between Jake and Eddie. I love them both. They're my boys. They're great. Jake, he's got such an attitude, his whole, what's that great quote? I don't like people, they fuck me up.
Yeah.
It's just like, I've been through a bit here and I'm going a bit crazy and I've just died and I'm actually going to die twice more. And seriously, he's a bit messed up, that boy, but, he's a hero and I love him. And Eddie, of course, well, and what can you say? It's got to be Aaron Paul, and
he's the best. That's what you got to say.
And he is fantastic. Favorite moment is probably the shootout at the Leaning Tower, where Eddie comes out guns blazing, totally naked. I'm totally with Roland on that one. I mean, my God,
not many men can fight naked.
Yeah.
Remember that, Ted.
Yeah,
that's an awesome moment, because at this point we're kind of thinking, Eddie, he's a junkie, he's in trouble, he doesn't really know what he's doing, he's completely obsessed with his brother, who's obviously a complete loser, and then suddenly when he's faced with this situation, he really comes through and. That's the first glimpse we see of the Eddie that we're going to grow to love.
Yeah, that's definitely that's an underrated one too. That's the one that we don't get brought up a lot. Like when we had people email in and stuff. And I think you maybe even sent an email along these lines of some of these like the base questions we ask. But it's probably been so long ago. There's probably a lot of listeners that haven't heard that far back or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So,
or don't remember like me.
Yeah, it gets tough, like keeping everything straight, man. Like, we got a lot of different people, a lot of different
especially
opinions,
since we got what, like 7 Chris's that talk to us. We got one in the chat asking Chris
it's very
questions.
difficult. Particularly when some other Chris is like, saying outrageous things and you're saying, oh, Chris, don't say that. And I'm going, you're not talking about me. You need to differentiate.
I'm sorry. It's Travis that's asking these questions in the chat.
Chris, because then we have like OG Chris, we call him, just because he was like the first. I think he's the first email we ever had.
First email.
And he actually had to leave from the chat. But yeah, no, we definitely have a lot of Chris's. And that's why we were like eventually, like early on even, we realized like we got to start like differentiating something. Like, okay, everyone start putting like where you're from so we could like.
Makes it a lot easier. There's OG Chris and there's Chris from Endworld.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Okay. You want to know why I'm Chris from Endworld?
Yes.
Okay, so before I made the timeline, I was actually working on a map. And then you guys posted the link to that guy who'd made a map on Reddit.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, oh, God, and I looked and I thought, I disagree with the distances here, but it's a beautiful map. Yeah. And I can't do better than that. So I'm going to move on to like my second on the priority list, which was this timeline. So it was because of that I put all my effort into the timeline.
Okay.
The map's not completely abandoned, but the reason I'm Chris from Endworld was because I'd worked out all the distances, again using the same process of doing searches throughout all the 7 ebooks, and basically worked out a scale for Midworld, and the distance from more or less the start of the story to Endworld was something like 13,000 miles, and I get my miles and kilometres mixed up a bit, but I thought I'm about 13,000 miles away from you guys, so I must be Chris from Endworld.
That's awesome.
Well, that's assuming that we're Midworld, or what's the other one? What's inside of Midworld? Because it's Midworld, Endworld, Inworld. Yeah, Inworld.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I've never thought about that. I was just like, because like it's not to be like stereotypical, but I always think of like Australia as like, the just open vast areas. I mean, of course I know there's cities, but like when I see Australia, like there's like the images that come to mind. I'm sure
the outback.
Yeah,
that's what you think of.
Yeah. So like I always kind of associate it with that. But no, that's awesome to hear. Like the actual reason.
There is a reason.
Yeah, yeah.
They totally could have made the movie in Australia. They really could have.
Yeah, and I think I've mentioned many times before is like for me any post-apocalyptic thing in my mind instantly is going to be Mad Max, which obviously is filmed down there. Because all of them were, the originals were too, and the new one I think they did as well, right? Yeah. So like that's always going to be like my image for like that's the way I always pictured
post-apocalyptic world.
This, I mean, when I read book 1, like,
oh really?
Yeah, I'm basically pulling like from Mad Max in my mind.
I always pictured the desert to the west of us.
Oh, okay, so more real.
That's
real
where
for us. I mean,
yeah,
for
it's
you,
where
that's
I
actually
camped.
Been there.
That's where I camped a lot when I was a kid and everything like that. So when you're talking about like sagebrush, no trees, or if there is trees, there's Joshua trees, and it's like it sounds a lot like Horseshoe Springs where I used to camp. A lot like it.
Very good. Yeah, well, that original Mad Max movie was filmed in Melbourne, where I am, and also just like 20 or 30 k's to the west of Melbourne, just in grassland.
Yeah,
it's really close by.
Yeah, I just grew up on those movies, and like Fury Road, obviously more recent. I mean, most people listening have at least seen that one, and I just think it was such an incredible movie and just a great testament to that series. But I'd recommend it to everyone. Honestly, it's a great series of movies. We also had someone ask now your favorite book of the series, because you said you love book 1, but is that your favorite book of the series, or did we ask that already?
Look, I've put my nickel down a couple of times on book 2 and book 4.
Okay.
But in my mind, there's books 1 to 5, and then there's books 6 and 7, and I prefer books 1 to 5. but I love them all.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And do you
and then
feel
Went Through the Keyhole is just like a separate add-on, in my view. Though I did actually listen to that the other day, and I know you guys have been a bit reticent to listen to the audiobook because Stephen King reads it instead of the amazing Frank Muller or George Goodell. But I understand where you're coming from, but I think Stephen King actually does a really, really good job of Wind Through the Keyhole. So you might want to reconsider.
You know, I actually have never listened to Wind Through the Keyhole. I have it on my Audible, but I've never listened to it. I've only read the paperback. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and Lou from the Stephen King podcast has said the same thing to us. I can't remember if it was on the air or whether it was emails or whatever, but he's definitely said the same thing. So I think next time I'm really into them, I'll make sure to add that to the list for audiobooks.
Do it.
Because he does, like I listened to Hearts in Atlantis, and I think it's William Hurt that does the Ted Broadbent story, Low Men in Yellow Coats, and that, oh my God, that is phenomenally read.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. And then you get on to the second story, and it's read by Stephen King, and it's like, oh God.
Yeah, that's a jarring change, I bet.
William Hurt, that's the guy that does Mr. Mercedes, right?
No, that's the guy that did Mr. Mercedes is the guy. I always think of him from he did some of those movies in the 90s.
Gone in 60 Seconds. I know that.
Yeah. No, William Hurt is. I'm trying to think. I'm blanking on movie season right now. He's like an iconic actor. Yeah. I don't know why I'm blanking. I'm a little bit tired, but yeah, he's an iconic actor. If you looked him up, you'd be like, oh yeah, that guy. Like you've seen him in, especially you growing up with your dad watching like some of the older classic movies.
Oh yeah.
But yeah. So you're now in terms of books 6 and 7, do you merge them together in your mind as well, Chris?
Like we do?
Oh, absolutely. It's just one book.
One book. Yeah, I have a hard time. Like one of these times, I've thought to myself, the only way to like split them is probably going to be just to like listen to book 6 in a complete vacuum, not in the middle of a read through. Just read 6 and then not go into 7, which would be really hard. But it's
That's impossible
because I have a really hard time separating them because I always listen to it all at one time or read it all at one time. That like suddenly I'm like, wait, what was in which book again? Because
I always forget that book 6 ends with them about to go into the Dixie Pig. Like I always put the confrontation of the Dixie Pig in book 6 for some reason in my mind. I don't know why.
Yeah. I just had to ask that because with the way you have those split, that's definitely 1 through 5 and 6 and 7 for sure. Now another one that was asked, and I think you kind of teased it a little bit earlier, Chris. Any plans to create other timelines for another series actually? Because you said your program at least craps out on us once per episode. It's just almost inevitable, but it's one of those things. It's kind of like Skype. There's not a lot of other options for.
Yeah. So do you want me to keep talking? Or?
Oh yeah. We can go ahead and the live stream will be right. I'll just text them in the thing here and tell them we'll be back once it reloads here.
Sure.
But yeah, go ahead and keep going.
Yeah. So the other things I want to do is I still want to make my map, and it'll be different to any other maps out there. And I've got to say, I did find one linked to on Etsy. I think it was. No, it wasn't. It was on Redbubble. If you have a look there, it is a phenomenal map of Midworld. It's so beautiful. But again, the distances are all wrong. Like you can't walk for a week or two up the beach dragging someone and have that be the same distance as Blaine travels in 8 hours. You know, it just doesn't work that way. You know, I don't care how much time is funny and how much the points of the compass are shifting. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm still hoping to get a map. But it's not just going to be a map of Midworld. It's going to be a map of the Dark Tower series. And they travel a lot of places other than Midworld. So, I've got very grand plans for that, but it'll probably take me another couple of years to actually put it all together. So we'll wait and see. And I'd also like to create a visualization of the interaction of the books with the tower. The other books. Now there is a poster out there that Tessie Girl from Tasmania in Australia has put together, which is pretty phenomenal. And I'm sure you've probably seen that link too. And it basically shows just about how every book is connected to every other book. And it's like, in my view, it's almost impossible to follow. It's so complex, but what an amazing piece of work.
Yeah. So you want to do one that's a little bit more like tower centered?
Yeah, sort of like the towers in the middle, and how do the various ancillary books tie in with the tower.
Oh,
so
I want that.
That's very much in the back of my head. It'll be a long way off if that ever happens, but I've got to continue reading all the other books so that I know how that works.
Yeah.
There's a lot more out there. So that's a way off.
Now,
with regard to the actual timeline itself, I'd like to sort of add bits to that. I'd like to put an overlay on it on the web just to identify parts of the timeline that correspond to each book. So you can say, okay, book 1 is this bit, and book 2 covers all of that, and then there's this massive bit in book 6, and this sort of thing. So just to sort of help represent what goes where in the timeline a bit more. So yeah, lots of ideas, not much time.
Yeah,
we'll see how we go.
Yeah. Now, when you talk about the connections to the tower, would there be any thought towards Stephen King's son and his books? Have you read those at all? Like, because I just finished. I just blanked on the name of it. Nosferatu, from Joe Hill, and that had like some really, really strong overt connections to the tower. So much so that honestly, there's a lot of times I had a hard time forgetting that it was not Stephen King. Like, really? he writes very similarly, and I just kept thinking, oh, it's Stephen King, and then it mentions the tower, and it's like, oh yeah, and like a chapter later, I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't Stephen King. you just did some tower references. So I don't know.
How proud must Stephen King feel at the moment that he's got 2 best-selling authors as sons?
Yeah, no kidding. Like, it's either something in the water at that household, or I do know that he's mentioned in some interviews, or I can't remember if it was on writing or whatever, but he's mentioned, I think, that they really push their kids to not in a hard way, but in terms to be creative, and they did reading, and they didn't watch TV and stuff after dinner. They read together and did creative writing, and it's almost like they were bred in a way to be authors. And I mean, I think his wife's an author too, so it's one of those things I almost think it's just you gravitate towards what's around you, and they're definitely around that feel, I guess.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
And so I think I may have cut you off. Is there any other projects that you have in the pipeline or in your head even?
No, that's about it for the moment. I think that there's many years' work to actually create those. I mean, this is. We
just got Travis here.
Yeah, we had a few, and it just keeps killing us here a little bit with that. But we also wanted to. We're still going for the podcast. So ultimately, if people are on the live stream, and we always recommend with the podcast, if we do drop out or whatever. And this show we're going to get to in just a minute. We have extra reason to do the podcast. So let's get on over to the next slide. I want to say we had. No, that was okay. Never mind. Yep. We got to that. So you want to talk about throw the website and stuff out there again? I have it in the chat, but for the podcast listeners that probably aren't maybe didn't write it down earlier, because I know I'm that way where someone will say a website early in an episode, and I'll be like, wait, I'm driving, and then later on I'm like, say the website again. I don't want to go back and find it. I want to go to the website I was driving or something. So you want to throw the different places to both the website and also where they people can buy it.
Yeah, sure. So the website is chartingthetower, all one word, .wordpress.com. And from there, that links to the store where you can buy the poster, and it also links to the earlier version that's available freely on the web if you want to download it. And then if you want to go straight to Etsy.com and just do a search for Dark Tower Timeline, it's the only hit. You'll find it straight away.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, because I just definitely want to like tell everyone that's listening, especially if you're on the podcast, go to darktowerpalaver.com. We'll have all these links. You can go and get like a look at what Chris has done here. You've heard us talking about it here for a while, but I would say, I know we're a little bit late in the episode, but I'd say definitely it's one of the ones I'd suggest jumping on the YouTube version and watching, so you can see some of these visuals as we're going. But I would definitely recommend everyone that's listening to go check this out and probably buy one, because like these things are incredible. If you're a Dark Tower collector, I know we have a lot of those. This is definitely something that you want in your collection, and it's just, again, I love like when fans of something go out of their way to create something that's like, for like fan art in general, is something I always love, because I always find it always ends up being sometimes better than what the official people are making, like when it comes to like posters or whatever else, and like things like this, like no way is someone gonna do this like in an official capacity, like,
right?
Like King's not gonna do this,
no.
Whatever, things like that. Maybe some of the people that do like the concordances and stuff, maybe, but like Chris, you've done it as a fan, and I just think that's such an awesome thing, and I just want everyone as Dark Tower fans to like support this stuff. Is like,
yeah,
and that's just me talking, not Chris didn't set me up to this. I believe in this a lot, so definitely go check that out, guys, because it's awesome. And Chris, thank you for doing it, because it's incredible.
Yes, thank you.
Look, that's completely fine. I loved making it, and I'm just loving that people are enjoying it too. So thanks a lot. Are we wrapping up now?
I mean, I do you have any more that you like? Because I think we're getting closer to the time to where we probably won't have time for like call-ins and stuff. We want to talk a little bit about the show for next year, and then we want to get into. I guess we could talk about now. Let's talk about a reason for people to download the podcast while you're on. Because the other thing we want to thank you for is you actually gave us a copy of the poster to give out to listeners.
Yes.
And absolutely.
And we wanted to do that as a contest, and you came up with a really great question. And so what we're going to do is, just to make it on an even footing for everyone, is we're going to go through like the end of this like a normal thing for the live stream, and then we're going to end the live stream, and we're going to continue to record a little bit and give that question out, so that everyone listening to the podcast midweek when it drops can hear that question at the same time, and the first person to email us the answer correctly with the correct like quote from the book will have a copy of the poster mailed to them. So
yeah, well, that'd be fantastic. Yeah.
So yeah, thank you so much for donating that, and also me and Peter both got one as well, which we definitely appreciate a ton.
I cannot wait to frame this and put it up in my house.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna be up here in the studio, so it'll be one of those things that like, I don't know. I've
got a sports wall, and now I have 5 or 6 things that I gotta determine what wall is going to become my nerd wall. So this is definitely going to be front and center in that.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So
I've got to say, I've got a framed one just next to me on my Opus wall, and it looks fantastic. So I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, and so thanks for that, and then thank you for the one for the listeners too. I've always like toyed with the idea of having some kind of giveaway. I've just never had anything necessarily to give away. So if you guys are listening on the live stream, just download the podcast. It'll be at the very end, toward the end after we've ended the live stream portion. But yeah, that's what we'll do for the giveaway. And thank you, Chris, for that. And is there any other things you wanted to throw out there, like debate things for me and Peter, questions or like comments? Like we don't want to like push you out the door necessarily. We want to have it's Palaver. We don't care about time as much, but it's up to you.
Yeah, no, I think we've covered pretty much everything. I guess I just wanted to finish up by thanking you two for running this podcast now for just over 2 years. It's been, hasn't it?
Yeah. We hit our 2. I think we actually missed it. Just like
we didn't even realize it. Yeah, honestly,
like the first
September was 2 years.
Yeah. So yeah, and we appreciate that. And honestly, it's just like you said. Like this is just a labor of love. Like we just love doing this. We love. We're doing that. We would have been doing this anyway. We just decided to throw mics in front of us and actually throw it out there rather than just do it between the two of us, because we're always having these discussions anyway. And it's been enriching to have you listeners, like add to all the conversations and to be part of the extended content. Like it adds a lot more to it. And so we appreciate you guys.
It's a great format that you have. I think I said to you at some point in an email that, the thing I like the most about the show is the interaction with the listeners and the just reading out people's emails and people's thoughts and having you guys just go off on massive tangents about them. It's just great because I'm one of these guys who, apart from my friend over in the States who sent me the books, I don't know anyone who's read them. And so, it was about a year and a half ago I started listening to your show, and it's been, just terrific. Every couple of weeks I can download a few hours of people geeking out about the Tower, which is just awesome.
It's honestly one of the most rewarding things. I've never considered it when Tad and I first started laying out the plans to doing this podcast, is how many people, and Travis just said it in the chat as well. He said, "So glad y'all did, because I don't know a single person that loves these books that I can interact with." And that's one of the most rewarding things about doing this podcast for you guys, is that I never thought about people who didn't have a Tad to talk to, who hey dude, you got to read these books, and now I have him to go to anytime. I'm like, hey, this one line makes me think that Mordred may not be such a bad guy, but
I can't believe he said that.
Then Tad
now I got
instantly corrects me because he is a really bad guy.
Well, you said a really good guy, didn't you?
No. Did I say good?
Yeah, I think you did. I think I have that on tape now,
bad.
too.
Oh, man.
And also having Peter on tape is the absolute best thing in the world, because it'll always come back. But no, yeah, and I'll just to tag along with what Peter's saying there, is like, it is one of those things that's unforeseen. I don't think we necessarily considered that when we started the show, but it has been actually one of the most rewarding things, is like for guys like you and Travis in the chat, like, because it's hard to imagine. Like I had it for a bit, and that's why I pushed Peter so hard to read them, because like I needed someone else to nerd out with, and so it's cool to fill that role, because I don't know, it would be a bummer to be out in the middle of nowhere with like no fans of the book to be with, like, be it wherever you're located. You could be in the middle of nowhere in New York City and have no one around you. Like, it's not necessarily a geographical thing as much as just not having anyone that shares your interest with it.
We had a fan maybe a couple months ago, right, and say that he was a fan of the Tower series and everything like that, and he lived in Toronto. Like, it's a huge city, to have no one to talk to about the books. It's just it's mind blowing. And well, Chris, you said you're from Melbourne, right?
Yeah.
Another big city.
Yeah, another big city. It's just like, oh.
So yeah, it's just awesome, and I love it too. Early on, it was probably the most nervous I've ever been, because it took us a couple episodes to get emails, and I was always just like, man, like, I love doing this, but like I always pictured, like, fan interaction, like other fans like writing in, and like, the way we do the show now is how I always pictured it. But early on, you don't have like a huge listenership as the show grows. And when there's no emails, I was just like, man, I don't know if this show's going to last, man. And then then the emails started coming in, and it really made
it took off so fast.
Yeah, it basically started to create the show that to being the way that it always was pictured in my mind.
Yeah,
but early on, I was always just like, man, this is tough, just the two of us, I guess. But I don't know. Like, so yeah, we appreciate you guys as fans, and and honestly, like, even just like doing this with you, Chris, like, I've even like considered during the course of the show, if like even just have things where if people wanted to like say they wanted to join us for a palaver, and like I have other podcasts I listen to, I know, where they'll just have random people that will be part of it for a show, just to
you
kind
were
of mix
part of
things
one
up.
of your podcasts once, weren't you?
Yeah, and so maybe I this is just on the fly. I haven't even planned this out, but like maybe we'll even look into that for 2018, and maybe having something where we could have people, if they want to join us. And Chris, you're definitely always welcome. The door is always open anytime you want to jump on with us here and record.
Especially when you get that poster of the multiverse up. That's happening. Like I'm calling the shots now, Ted. That's happening.
Yeah, but
we've got a lot of reading to do before that ever happens.
But let us know if you need help.
Yeah,
well, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, the timeline as it is, it covers Salem's Lot, it covers Insomnia, it covers The Stand. They're all there on the timeline. But something more, something that's more about, all the different strands that come in from all the different directions and spiral up into the tower. I just reckon that'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really would.
Yeah. but yeah, no, anytime. Like, you don't have to create some huge elaborate thing to come on. You can come on anytime, Chris. You're yeah.
Well, thank you.
And we're definitely I'm gonna keep pounding the drum for people to go buy this, because I think everyone should. I think it's one of those ones that, like, seeing it online is one thing, but like when I opened the thing you sent and like looked at it, and I was just like, whoa, like suddenly it was different. And it's I guess it's like the thing, like books have not really taken off in an ebook kind of way. Like music, everything else seems to be going digital, but like books seems to be the one thing that people are like, they want hard copies. And I think this kind of fits into that, where it's just like, you want a hard copy of this. You don't,
yes, you do.
You don't just want to like look at the low res picture online. You definitely want this on your wall, because it's incredible.
Yeah, Tad can vouch for me. When I got here today, he pulled it out. So this is my first time having hands on with it, and he showed it to me, and I just, what was it, like 5 minutes? I just sat looking at it.
Yeah.
Just mesmerized. Just, oh my God, look at this thing.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
There's just something different about hard copy when it comes to things like this.
The first time I picked up a print of it, I just, my jaw just dropped. I just, oh my God, what have I done? You know, how the hell did that happen? You know.
Yeah, it's just awesome. And so yeah, we're definitely I'm gonna keep reminding people to hit this up and order some, because it is definitely something that would be like just awesome for everyone to have. Like I said, like I know there's a lot of collectors out there. I mean, now we have like Funko Pops, we have like just all kinds of things to collect as Dark Tower fans. In the old days, it was like books and comic books, but now we've got like all kinds of different things, and this is definitely something to add into there. So.
Yeah. There is actually one more thing I'd like to bring up before we close.
Yeah.
I'd be really keen to hear your idea on this. Even when I made the timeline, and it was like, you know, if you stop and look at it, it's all there. I didn't actually fully get it until someone mentioned it online. So they're in Palaver in Sturgis, okay. And Susanna, you know, they've just defeated the wolves, and there's like, you know, much rejoicing. And Susanna sneaks off and heads to New York in 1999. And then they go up to the cave, and Jake and Callahan and Oi go off to New York in 1999. And then Eddie and Roland go back to 1977. All in Keystone Earth, where time only runs one way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah, I see.
How does that work?
And that's where it's like when you get into time travel, that's why it's like, yeah, I get it only goes one way, but like when it comes to time travel, like I don't know if you can really say that, because like, yeah, like even what you just pointed out there, like if they're able to just go back into a different, a way older time period, like how does that work?
And then they go forward to 99 later on.
Yeah, but when they go forward to 99, it's after the others, so it's all consistent from then on. You know, no one ever doubles back in Keystone Earth, except for that one time.
Oh, interesting.
And you can make stuff up like, oh, well, you know, maybe it's only from one person's point of view that you can't go back in time and all these sorts of things. But yeah, I can't help but think that was just something that Stephen King couldn't quite get out of, or maybe didn't realize when he wrote it or something.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, like, in general, haven't we generally got the idea that most of them are basically rough drafts? Like, I don't think he did, like, a lot of, like, deep, especially those later books. I don't think he did a lot of deep, like rewrites or anything like he's always said, like, you know, what you got is like not necessarily it's like a manuscript necessarily. Like they obviously did spell checks and stuff, but like I don't feel that like he necessarily went and polished them, which is I almost like. I like the rawness of the books, but I think that sometimes maybe small things like that may slip through where, you know, if he had gone through and really went in depth, he probably would have been like, oh wait, that doesn't work, and then he would have removed it or something. I don't know.
Or made
when did Robin Firth become involved and do the concordance? Was that after book 4? I think it was.
Yeah, I'm fuzzy on that timeline actually.
I think Stephen King, he finally got to the point at some point where he just said, okay, I don't know what I've done. In the last 15 years, I've written these 4 books, and I can't remember how it all fits together. So I'm going to get Robin Firth to just like comb through them all and create an encyclopedia of my work so that I can I can have a reference book and make sure I don't muck too many things up.
Yeah, and I think because like I remember the one that comes to mind is before he wrote the stories, he would read or do the audiobooks, because he mentions that when he talks about Frank Muller passing away or getting in the accident, because I don't think he passed away by the time he
passed away then.
But he has that where he basically spells out about the fact that, like, you know, he basically relived the series with Frank Muller to get back, you know, prime the pumps for the next book type thing. But it's one of those things, man. You can't just listen. You'd have to like take some serious notes, which is probably why he brought Robin aboard to help guide the way a little bit.
Yeah, because it's not like, you know, George R.R. Martin, where he's just basically writing Song of Ice and Fire and he's just taking his time over it. But, you know, Stephen King's like, okay, well, here's a Dark Tower book. Now I'm going to go and write 4 or 5 other books that have nothing to do with this whatsoever. And one day I might, you know, get back to this if, you know, Gan lets me.
Yeah.
And that just must have been hell for the readers, you know, knowing that, you know, they really want to know what happens next in the Dark Tower. And here's another book by Stephen King that's not related to the Dark Tower. Oh, and here's another one and another one. Get back to the tower.
It always reminds me of that story that he told in one of the back parts of the book where a woman wrote him after book 3 book 3 and that what happens with the conclusion with Blaine. I won't tell anyone I'm dying, you know. Please tell me. And he's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I don't know yet.
And it took that van to really get him to really just throw everything aside and just get that last tail end of the series done, you know. Because I think he realizes the weight of what the series is, and, you know, the gravity behind it. I think like that near death experience was enough for him to be like, oh man, like if this had gone the other way at the hospital, like this series would forever be left, you know, on this moment.
It would be one of the worst tragedies in literature history is that he didn't get to finish the Dark Tower series.
There's some other like really epic things that the authors have died. I'm blanking on them because it's like when it comes to like the high fantasy stuff, I'm not the most keen, but I believe there's some out there that the author has passed away, and then
we're about to get another one too with George R.R. Martin.
Yeah, so. At the rate that dude's writing, I mean, it's like, man, come on.
Well, the Wheel of Time that I mentioned early on, that was planned to be 12 books, and I believe, is it Robert Jordan, I think is the author's name, died after writing 11 of them, but he had the final book so well planned out that you know, he basically shared that plan with another author, who then turned the final novel into 3. So it's ended up being a 14 book cycle.
Jeez. Yeah.
And,
wow.
Yeah, that's pretty full on. But from what I've been told, those final 3 books are actually the best 3. So it'll be interesting if and when I get there.
Yeah, that's there's a bunch of those things out there. So I guess we're blessed by Gan that Stephen King survived that accident, was able to finish our series. I mean, so much as it can be finished, because as Travis mentions in the chat, you know, we're getting another book. We covered that a few episodes back, where Stephen King said that he's probably going to write another Dark Tower book. So I guess if nothing else, you're going to have to update the timeline potentially again if it's connected directly to Roland, right?
Yeah, well, absolutely. You know, I had to include book 8. You know, that's what everyone said. Where's book 8? So it's in there. Just a little patch up in the top left-hand corner. But you know, and the other thing was, you know, what about the movie? If that's like the next time around, you know, do I try and include that? You know, Roland's line across the top doesn't go back to this poster; it goes on to another one. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, indeed. Do you have any hopes for another book? Like, if King was to come to you and ask, "What should I do next?" What would you say?
Look, it's hard not to go with Jericho Hill, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's.
We all want to really know the details of that. I mean, there's so much death, so much, you know, so much like angst for Roland, and we love the fact that he's a tortured soul. So, you know, I'd love that, but I'd also just love to you know, read about you know, the formation of the Tech Corporation and that whole storyline. So, you know, I mean, you guys have mentioned both those so many times. So, you know, I think they'd both be great. But I think when it comes to the crunch, I'd go Jericho Hill.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest event in the books that we don't really have spelled out in a huge way. Like I don't know if there's another event that even comes close. Like that's a pretty big one.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, Win Through the Keyhole was nice, but it was just basically a really good story that happened to have some familiar characters in it, but it wasn't really a Dark Tower story as such.
Yeah.
In my
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of times, like even with our show intro, a lot of times I just talk about the first the 7 primary books. Like it Went Through the Keyhole is awesome, but it doesn't. A lot of times it doesn't feel necessarily like if we spoiled that one. I don't know if people would be as mad if we spoiled book 7, say, if they hadn't read it.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. People are very touchy about book 7.
Yeah, indeed. That's and rightfully so. I mean, just like if you're reading that far into it, it'd really suck to get that close to the end and then have something spoiled. But in this world, I don't know how people avoid it, man. Like I look at the subreddit, like it's not spoiler friendly at all for the most part. I mean, usually people post like, "Oh man, this series is so great. I'm right in the middle of book 3," and people are like, "Get out of here."
Yeah, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, run as fast as you can. Get off.
Break your phone.
Yeah, like just delete Reddit. Get rid of it all. Run away. Yeah, indeed. Well, yeah. Again, Chris, thank you so much for doing this, and thanks for joining us here because this has been an awesome conversation. Just covering this, and also, of course, tangent heavy, going into the different elements of the book and stuff too. It's awesome. In my mind,
I've had so much fun chatting with you guys. It's been a great palaver, and I just really appreciate you giving me the time on your show to basically just geek out with you and spruik my picture. So thanks again. It's been absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, our pleasure.
Yeah, you're welcome back anytime.
All right. Thanks very much, guys. So we'll call it quits then, I think.
Alrighty. We will talk to you later. We're going to hit up some stuff on some news, and then we're going to get into your thing after we end the live stream for the giveaway, for the question. So we will hear from you later.
Fantastic. And good luck, everyone, with the giveaway. It's a good question, I think. So, you might have to get your thinking caps on and work it out.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks so much, Chris.
All right. Cheers, guys. Bye now.
See ya. All right, so that was Chris from Australia, a longtime Palaver TET member, Dark Tower Palaver TET member, and just great creator when it comes to this. Like I almost feel like lucky, like when I found this and stuff, and it turned because I can't remember. I want to say I found because he posted some stuff on Reddit. He talked about an earlier version, and I remember seeing it and just being like, oh, this is so cool, and somehow I can't remember that it just crossed that I realized that it was this Chris. I'm like, oh wow, it's someone that listens to our show, and so I just felt super lucky that he's someone that listens to where we can do something like this and have a show with them and stuff versus just some random stranger on the internet. It would be a little bit tougher, I think, but so that's awesome. So yeah, we're gonna talk about 2018 real quick, and then we will close up shop for the live stream, and then if you are obviously on the podcast, you looking at your counter on the time, you'll know there's a little bit of time left as we give out that question. So for 2018, as you guys know, if you've been with us for any period of time, we generally take around the holidays off. So this is actually going to be our last show for 2017. And we will be coming back in January, obviously, of 2018. But real quick, before we jump into that, just synopsize real quick, Peter. What 2017 as a Dark Tower fan?
Waiting.
Yeah, waiting. A lot of frustration.
Honestly, it's kind of a payback, I guess, a little bit for us. That didn't have to wait for any of the books. We had to wait for the movie being delayed twice and everything like that.
And also the longer period of it's a 10-year project from the rights being bought.
I mean, yeah, we had been waiting, but I mean, it's it's not waiting until, oh my gosh, there's film with Idris as Roland and Matthew McConaughey as the Man in Black and Tom as Jake somewhere. I just can't watch it yet.
Yeah.
There's that wait that honestly it was worse for me to wait for Dark Tower than it was to wait for Star Wars, and I'm a huge Star Wars nerd and everything like that,
Yeah.
And it was a lot of waiting, a lot of anticipation, a lot of build up and everything like that. And then I loved it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't trade it for almost anything. That
Yeah.
was so much fun to go through that with all you guys and everything. And we've talked about it before. We've neglected the book clubs and everything like that. I cannot wait to get diving in head first into drawing the 3 more. And also some of the other stuff that we have planned. Travis brought it up in the chat also earlier about the Great Flag Debate.
Yeah.
We are still going to have that. That is definitely going to be something on the slate for 2018, and I'm really looking forward to that one. Throw down and go toe to toe once and for all.
May the best flag fan win.
Whatever. There is no such thing as a good flag.
Yeah, for me, the 2017, I don't know, like, I don't want to say necessarily that it's like a Dark Tower thing, but like for me, it's more about the journey. Like, especially with the show here, it's been an incredible year. A lot of new people, a lot of new listeners, a lot of new people we've interacted with, new stories to hear of, like, you know, I just think of all the different stories we've heard of, like how they finished the books, how they came to the books. Like it's so I look at all that kind of stuff, and even like a lot of the hype, like hyping up the movie and getting so excited.
Came out.
The trailer,
yeah.
I mean, but even like going back to like the screenshots of Idris the first time in costume. I mean, there was just so much, and like all that stuff is like stuff I cherish, and like regardless of what you think of the movie, I hope if your guys out, if people are out there that don't necessarily like the movie, I would hope that even still the journey getting to it was fun. And it's almost like a very Dark Tower-esque thing, because a lot of people were not super happy with the ending, but it is one of those things. It's more about the journey than the end itself.
Yeah.
So it's like when me and you sat down in that theater, you know, as the trailers were getting ready to start, like to me, it's like that was kind of the end of the journey, but at the same time, like I enjoyed the journey so much that like even if I hated the movie, which I didn't, I still think it would have been a really great year for 2017.
Yeah.
For me, and for the podcast has been fun. You know, everyone that's joined us, everyone that's continued to listen to us through 2017, it's been awesome, and we appreciate it. And yeah, we're super excited for the future, regardless of the fact that we don't know what's happening in terms of screen stuff.
You know, that's part of the fun. You know?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of unknown, but like we're still excited. Like I think that like there's I think some people even asked like on social media and stuff like, are you guys continuing the show? And it's just like one of those things where it's like, of course the movie took up a big chunk of this year, even for our show, but it's one of those things like we're not necessarily a Dark Tower movie podcast, we're a Dark Tower podcast. So
that's right.
You know, there's a lot of books stuff we still have to go through. There's new books coming out, comic books to read still. I mean, there's so much to do. I mean, we're going to be gray hair old men before I think we're done with this show.
That's right.
And even then, like, who knows? If stuff keeps happening, it's all a cycle. We just start back over. We'll be delusional by then. Dementia will be set in, and we'll.
You know what'll be really
over.
fun is by then we'll have my daughter to read the books with us.
Yeah.
As she grows up and everything like that. Down the road,
I'm still saying, man, read her Charlie the Choo Choo now. Like, go home tonight and read her Charlie the Choo Choo.
I still don't know.
And it is. Oh, I thought
I forgot to buy it. I still haven't gone back and bought it.
I thought I got you a copy.
Did you get me a copy?
I thought I did.
Did you?
I thought I did.
I'm going crazy if I lost that. I gotta go find that. I gotta go.
Maybe
see.
your dementia's got here early, but
well, I do have a little bit of gray hair up here, so you know.
Yeah. So just in general, just to recap the year, it's just been awesome. And we're just excited for 2018. And I will jump the slide over and say that our first show of the year, because we're going to take a little bit of a break. So what we try to do is we try to line it up with like different holidays and different things to like make sure that we maximize what we could do for you guys in a given year. And the first year we actually did it, and it turned out to be perfect, but we actually didn't think that through that much. But at the end of the year, we were like, holy shit, like that really worked out well. Like every time there was a holiday, we were recording on the opposite week, you know.
Yep.
And it was just one of those things. Ever since then, we made it a concerted effort to make sure that we maximize it for you guys, because we want to be regular. One of the things I hate as a podcast consumer is irregularities when it comes to podcasting. So we want to be as regular as possible with you guys to make sure that, you know, especially as we're a bi-weekly show instead of a weekly show, that you guys have the episodes when expected. So January 12th is going to be that weekend, not necessarily the 12th itself, but the weekend of the 12th is when our first podcast of 2016 will be. So it's going to be a little bit more of a longer break than we usually have, but that one lines up the best with like all the holidays and even some personal things that like just different things where it's like, oh, well, this is like my anniversary or whatever. Like, it's good that we're not recording that weekend or whatever it might be. Like, so it just really lines up with all the a lot of different kind of things. So when we sign off here, ultimately, we will not be hearing from you again until January 12th or the weekend of January 12th. But we can't wait to be there for that. And we got a lot of cool like things, irons in the fire, as it were, for different ideas. I mean, we have, like you just mentioned, the flag debate. We have some different things we want to go over this year. There's plenty of things to talk about, even if not a 1 inch of the television series gets advanced. So
yep.
We're looking forward to that. I will even just throw out, it's just a little bit of a warning, I guess. One of the reasons I mentioned a few times that I was a little bit tired today. We went and saw the movie, but before that I was had a doctor's appointment. Nothing too serious, but there is potential that I'm going to be having a surgery in March that will kind of knock me on my butt, and I won't be working for potentially 2 weeks to a month. And I don't know how that's going to affect the show, but so there is a potential that March might turn into a dead zone a little bit. It just depends on what it is. It's actually, I mean, I'm not afraid to say it's an eye thing. I have a condition with my eye, so I'm probably getting some eye surgery done. And when it comes to like doing the podcast, I only had a talk with the doctor about, like, I told him, like, I don't do anything heavy with work. Like, all I'm doing is usually in front of a computer doing, like, spreadsheets and like stuff like that. And he's like, no, you still won't be working for at least 2 weeks. And it was like later on, the lady that was scheduling things was like, oh yeah, it might be a month. I'm like, oh. And so just to give you guys a warning, you guys, if you see, you'll know as we get closer to that. I'll keep you guys informed, but just going into the year, I'll let you know that there might be a little bit of a dead zone in March. Doesn't mean that we're losing interest or that we're whatever. It's just something planned this far in advance that probably I won't be able to be looking at screens too much. So
we're also looking at other options of maybe not being able to do a live show, but maybe we'll be able to record a couple book clubs and have those just as a while Tad's getting better, and
yeah. So if it looks like March turns out to be nothing but book clubs, that might be
that would be it, and we can record those ahead of time and have them out, and then we'll be able to put them out while Tad's on the mend.
Yeah, indeed. But yeah, we're super excited for 2018. Can't wait to just go through some more. Hopefully in the course of 2018 we'll finish book 2 and get into book 3 for our book clubs. With doing more regular, I'm pretty certain that'll be the case. So even like talking about Jack Andolini, we're going to go through that whole battle this year. I mean, book door 2, door 3.
The Leaning Tower is not that far off.
We're not that far. Probably the next couple book clubs. So so that's 2018. That's kind of what we have. We don't want to tease too much about some of the pokers we have in the fire because we don't know what'll pan out, what won't. But yeah, that's what we're looking at. And thank you guys so much for making 2017 an awesome one and just huge success overall. I think the show's been awesome. You guys have been awesome as listeners, and you guys have enriched the show in a way that makes it probably better than I ever expected it to be in a lot of ways. Not to downplay what like ourselves. Like, it's not like it's like punching myself, but it's just one of those things like you always wonder what things are going to look like, and it's a way better than I ever expected.
It's far exceeded my as well.
Yeah, but we do it for fun. So ultimately, if there was only one listener and they hated us and all they did is like derided us the whole time and made fun of us and stuff, we'd still probably do it. But it's awesome to have you guys. So thank you guys. We're gonna close up shop for the live stream. Remember to check out the podcast. Once we get past all this mushy stuff, you'll get to the trivia question for the contest for winning the poster for that Chris made and having that shipped to you. And what we're gonna so hit up the podcast and you'll get all the details on that. And for the live stream, guys, thank you guys for joining us in the chat. It's been fun. And sorry about the whole change of the days. That was a little bit unexpected, but hopefully this worked out for everyone. And see you next year.
Bye, guys.
Long days and pleasant nights, I guess, would be the right phrasing. Long days and pleasant nights, live stream.
Long days and pleasant nights, folks.